Wow, you sound great. Man. The scripture today is from Luke. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how we told you when he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to the hands of sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb, stooping and looking in. He saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home and amazed at what had happened. For these sacred words,
so there's a traditional greeting and response that's done on Easter, and you probably know it, but it goes something like this. Christ is risen, and the people say,
He is risen indeed.
All right, you got it. So file that away. Remember that. This is also the last Sunday of our sermon series where we've looked at the 7 social sins as were highlighted and emphasized by Gandhi. And today's last social sin is religion without sacrifice. Religion without sacrifice. So we've got 2 things happening today, Easter and the social sin of religion without sacrifice. A sports psychologist stood in front of the football team before the very first game of the season and told them the following story. Years and years ago, born into a German family, there were 2 brothers, Albrecht and Albert. And as they grew up, it became obvious to all that they were artistically inclined, that they had a talent and a gift for the arts. And as the boys grew, their talent became more and more obvious. And when the boys reached a certain age, the family wanted to send them both away to art school for proper training, but they only had enough money to send one. So they flipped a coin. And as a result of the coin toss, Albrecht got to go off to art school. Albert, though equally talented and gifted, had to go work in the coal mine with his siblings and father to help support the family and to help pay for art school for Albrecht. And then 4 years passed. And after 4 years, Albrecht came home and was much celebrated and had grown into his artistic gifts and established a name for himself. And he came home and they sat around the table rejoicing in his accomplishments. And Albrecht was very grateful for the sacrifices that had been made for him, especially the sacrifice of his brother Albert, who was equally gifted. And Albrecht said, "I'm grateful and I'm glad to be home, and now as a sign of my gratitude, I want to go and work in the coal mine for 4 years so that Albert can go and have the same artistic training that I have had." And Albert, sitting down at the far end of the table, raised his hands up and said, "Oh, brother, I've broken almost every bone in my hands in the last 4 years. The coal mine has taken its toll. My hands are arthritic and gnarled, and I will never be the artist I might have been. So thank you, but I cannot go." And Albrecht was so touched and so moved that he took his brother's hands and he turned them into a painting. And it was a very famous painting. It's come to be known throughout the decades. And very powerful. And the team listened to this story. And the sports psychologist told this story so that the team would understand what brotherhood and what sacrifice meant. So that when things got rough, they could say to each other, "I'm going to go into the coal mine for you, brother. I'm going to go into the coal mine for you, brother." And the team was inspired by that, and they had a good year and a winning season. And people all over the world have taken inspiration from this story of Albrecht and Albert. It is, however, completely made up. There was an Albrecht Dürer, who did paint this painting that you have probably seen. Those are not his brother's hands. There was no Albert. There was a Hans, we believe. But this was back at the end of the 1400s. And none of the things that happened in that legend actually occurred, other than Albrecht Dürer becoming a famous artist. But the story has inspired people for centuries. So the question for us today is that story an idle tale? In the last century, William James was a prominent intellectual who was kind of thought of as the father of American psychology. He also was one of the leading thinkers in a movement of philosophy called American pragmatism, along with John Dewey and Charles Saunders Peirce. And he wrote a great book called The Varieties of Religious Experience that I highly recommend. But William James tells a story that is popular in philosophical circles. And it goes like this. Apparently, William James was out walking through the woods one day, and he came across these people who were having an argument. And they were standing around a tree. And this was their argument. Suppose that you're walking through the woods, and you come upon a tree, and on that tree you see a squirrel. But as soon as the squirrel sees you, the squirrel runs around to the other side of the tree trunk, so that the tree is in between the squirrel and you. But you want to see the squirrel. So you start walking around the tree. But as you walk around the tree, the squirrel correspondingly moves on the other side of the trunk, so that you never see the squirrel. It's always moving along with you. And then you've completely circled the tree. You've completely gone around the tree. Then the question is, and this is what they were arguing about, when you've gone around the tree, have you gone around the squirrel? And there are two different ways of answering that question. It depends on how you look at it. Well, if you mean by that, were you in front of the squirrel, to the side of the squirrel, behind the squirrel, to the side of the squirrel, and in front of the squirrel again, then no, you never did go around the squirrel because it was always opposite you on the other side of the tree. But if you look at it like this, were you to the north of the squirrel, to the east of the squirrel, to the south of the squirrel, to the west of the squirrel, and back to the north of the squirrel? Then yes, you did go around the squirrel. And it all depends on how you want to look at it. And William James and other pragmatists said, these kinds of arguments are idle because they make no difference. And you're arguing over something that you can choose whichever criteria you want and make it be whatever you want it to be, and it makes no difference in your life. And any story that makes absolutely no difference in how you live is an idle tale. So the women get up early on that first Easter morning, and they go to the tomb, and they have taken spices with them to anoint Jesus' body. And they get to the tomb, and they find the stone rolled away, and they go inside, and his body is not there. And then they are visited by these two men in dazzling white who say, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen." And the women are amazed and astounded. And they run and they go tell the disciples, the male disciples. And the male disciples don't believe them and think that they're telling an idle tale. Now, there are probably lots of good sermons being preached today on how men have not taken the word of women over the centuries. And those are some really good sermons. I'm not preaching that one today, though, because I think it might cause us to lose sight of something very important. The story that the women are telling is incredible. Who has the credibility to tell such a story? I mean, it is an amazing story. They are saying that Jesus, the one who was crucified, dead, and buried, is alive. Now that's incredible. I hope 2,000 years of practice and tradition and ritual hasn't robbed us of the notion that that is an incredible thing to claim. It is absolutely amazing. And Christians have debated what it means for 2,000 years, this resurrection story of Jesus, some insisting that it is historical, that it happened that way, it was literal, it was physical. If you had a video camera on the tomb, you would have seen it happen. And others saying, no, it's more spiritual or figurative or metaphorical, it's more about the hope and those kinds of things. And so Christians are all over the spectrum, and chances are we have people here today from all over the spectrum and how they think about this story. But believing in Easter is an incredible thing to believe in. And believing in Easter is not an isolated belief. For instance, you don't catch belief in Easter with a fishing line. You can only catch belief in Easter with a net. Because believing in Easter comes with a lot of other beliefs that you also have to hold on to. And they're all equally incredible. I mean, to believe in Easter is to simultaneously believe that hope will triumph over despair. Now, have you seen despair in this world? It's everywhere. To believe that hope triumphs over despair is as incredible as believing that Jesus came back from the dead. To believe in the resurrection is to believe that love triumphs over hate. Have you seen the world? Hate is everywhere. Between all kinds of groups, different nations, ethnicities, races, sexualities, identities, ideologies, hatred is everywhere. There is an industry of hate built in to try to keep us all angry at each other. To say that love triumphs over hate is incredible. Every bit as incredible as believing that Jesus was raised from the dead. To believe in Easter is to simultaneously believe that peace will triumph over violence. Have you seen the world? Ukraine, Gaza, hundreds of places around the globe that are currently not in the spotlight. Violence is everywhere. To believe that Jesus was raised is to believe that peace triumphs over violence. And that is absolutely incredible. Now, there are Christians out there who say they believe in the resurrection, but they don't believe these other things. So when I hear somebody say, oh, I believe Jesus was raised, but I think that the solution to violence is more violence, then I think, then you don't believe Jesus was raised. If someone says, oh, I believe Jesus was raised, but, I mean, come on, we got problems, we got to deport people, then you don't believe Jesus was raised. Because Jesus being raised is the ultimate incredible claim. To believe that is to believe these other things. Religion without sacrifice is an idle tale. It is in our sacrifices and through our sacrifices that seeds are planted for resurrection. It is at the crucifixion that the seed is planted for Easter. It is in the sacrifices that we make because of our faith, because of our conviction, that seeds are planted for the transformation and the promise of Easter. Religion without sacrifice is an idle tale. Religion with sacrifice holds the promise of Easter. You know, even something that's true can be an idle tale. Soren Kierkegaard, the philosopher, tells a parable of a man who escapes from a mental institution. And he escapes into a nearby town, and he's afraid that the people in the town will recognize that he needs to be in the mental institution. So he adopts a strategy to prove to everyone that he's sane. He finds a marble, he puts it in his pocket, and he walks around the town, and every time he feels the marble hit against his leg, he says to the closest person, "The world is round." The world is round. The world is round. The world is round. Now that's true. They immediately recognized then he needed to be in the mental institution. So even something that's true can be an idle tale if it is not surrounded by a life filled with activities and other beliefs in the net that make it powerful and make it transformational. And that is what we are called to be and to do, is to be those seeds of transformation in the world. Because when we are that, we lead to Easter. And so as others have pointed out before me, yes, the traditional greeting and response is, Christ is risen. It could also be, Christ is risen in deeds. In our deeds, in our actions, and in our sacrifices. For in doing that, we transform violence into peace. And we transform hatred into love. And we transform despair into hope. Let us sing the hymn, Lord of all hopefulness.